going to talk about recommended settings for your Zoom for virtual trainings. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer here. Once again, these are the settings that worked well for us when we did a virtual training, virtual TOT1. Depending on who you talk to, you might have people make other recommendations to you. If you watch videos online, they may make other recommendations for settings. But these were the ones that I thought worked really well for us and our team thought worked well for us. So I'm just going to walk you through those. So first of all, you have to go to your zoom.com and you need to sign in with your login and password. Once you get to this address, this URL, you want to go to settings. And settings is where you find all the settings or almost all the settings that you will use while you are in a conference call and to set up your Zoom account to work appropriately for conference calls. One of the first ones you'll notice here is the waiting room. And so right now we're talking, there are three different sets of settings, one for meetings, one for recordings, one for telephone. And as you walk down through the page, it will automatically switch from one to the next to the next. But waiting room, you want to have the waiting room on. You may not think that would be a good thing to do, but actually Zoom is upgrading their security and you will have to have the waiting room enabled, or you'll have to have a password for every single one of your people to access your account in the very near future. So recommended practice, having waiting room on. There are some options you can have that you can set. Who should go to the waiting room? Everybody, or users who are not in your account, or users who are not in your allowed domains. That's how I have mine set up. So if they're not coming from their email address is not med-am.org, they will have to go into a waiting room. And who can admit participants from the waiting room into the actual meeting? You can have it either be hosts and co-hosts only, or anyone who bypassed the waiting room in addition to the hosts and co-hosts. So somebody else from Medical Ambassadors could admit someone to the conference call as well. So those are some options. You can customize the waiting room if you wish. I'm not going to go into that because that's something you can set up to your own preference. I have my account set up to not require a passcode. And the reason we did that was we didn't want people to have not only to log in, but have a passcode in order to access. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for people that are calling in to virtual trainings to be able to get into the meeting. Require a passcode for instant meetings. That's again up to you. Not really relevant for what we're talking about as far as virtual trainings. And require a passcode for a personal meeting ID. Again, I don't think you need that enabled. Enable a passcode in the invite for the one-click join. What that does is the link that you send out to everyone embeds the passcode in it so people don't have to enter it separately. So I'd advise you to have that one turned on. Require passcodes for participants joining by phone. Again, I'd have that on just because you don't want people dialing into your call that aren't supposed to be there. Only authenticated users can join meetings. We didn't have people do that. Again, we wanted to keep it as simple as possible, so that one was off. Only authenticated users can join meetings from a web client. It was also off. As far as scheduling meetings, we have it always start with the host video on. So if you're going to be hosting the training, it's good to have that set to on so that your video will come on. You'll be on immediately as soon as you log into the call. Same thing for participants' videos. Now, that could be that you will want to change that at some point because if someone has a very low bandwidth, maybe they're better just to have audio instead of video on. But I would encourage you to try it with video on for everybody. It's wonderful to be able to see everybody's face, to be able to read their reactions to what's being said and their level of engagement. As far as the audio type, you have three options. I would highly recommend having it for both telephone and computer audio. Have that be on instead of just one of the other two options. Join before host. Will you allow people calling in to join the meeting before the host arrives? Yes, have that set to yes. Again, making it simple, that's the idea. Enable a personal meeting ID. If you're on the Pro plan, you have the option to have a personal meeting ID created for you that will not change. It will stay the same, and you can use that for every meeting that you have. And if you're doing a series of trainings over a period of a week or several weeks, having it be the same ID every time, I think, is really important. And do you want it, so you enable it, but do you want it to actually use it when you schedule the meetings? You need to set that to yes as well. And also if you're going to start an instant meeting, which is not relevant to our virtual trainings. Mute participants upon entry, I have that set to yes. They can mute and unmute themselves, or as a host, you can mute and unmute people as well. Do you want to send upcoming meeting reminders? So this will give a desktop notification for upcoming meetings. I think that's very important. That's primarily for you, just to remind you that you've got a meeting coming up, or that you have a meeting you're supposed to join. So basic in-meeting controls require encryption. We could do that, but again, I'd recommend keeping it simple and have it off for now. Do you want to enable chat? That's an important one. You want to use chat in the meetings, so you want that to be set to yes. Do you want private chat available as well as a group chat? Yes, you do. That way, participants can send one-to-one messages to each other during the training without having to broadcast that to the entire group. Do you want it to automatically save chats for every meeting? And it will save them into a file that will put into your documents folder, into a special Zoom folder that Zoom will create that will save the chats in it. They aren't particularly easy to read. It does timestamp everything. So it's not like a document that would look like a Word document. It's plain text format, but it's there if you want to have it. Do you want to have a sound notification when someone joins or leaves the call? I think that's good to know. If somebody's call drops, it's good to know that they dropped out, and the sound will notify you of that. And who do you want the sound to play for? Everyone in the call or just a host and co-host? I'd recommend host and co-hosts only. File transfer. Do you want to be able to send files through the chat in Zoom? Very important that that is set to yes. Feedback to Zoom. This one you probably could go either way, but it gives users a chance to provide feedback to Zoom, not to the hosts, but to Zoom at the end of the meeting, telling them how the call went and connectivity and any issues. Do you want to display an end of the meeting experience feedback survey? I don't think you need to do that. At the end of your training, you probably want to send a survey anyway to all the participants, but not at the end of each meeting, so I would have that off. Do you want to allow co-hosts? This is very important. You should always have at least one co-host in addition to the host. And the reason for that is you want the co-host to be able to admit people into the calls, answer questions that pop up in chat, notice who's raising their hand for a question, so the facilitator isn't distracted by that. They can be facilitating, but the co-host can be watching for that. So it's very important. Polling is a nice little tool in Zoom that allows you to post questions and get immediate feedback from the people that are on the call. Recommend that be set to yes. Always show the meeting control toolbar. I think it's good, especially till you get really familiar with Zoom, that this is set to on as well. It can tend to block part of a screen, and you might need to hide it once you're actually in a call, if you're doing a presentation in PowerPoint or something, for example. But the control toolbar is an important tool to be able to access. So if you are going to hide it, you need to make sure you know how to get it back. We'll talk more about that later. And do you want to show Zoom windows during the screen share? Again, set that to yes. Screen sharing. Do you want to allow the host and participants to share their screen or content during meetings? Definitely that needs to be on. You can say I want the host only, or I want all participants. I think it's good to have it to all participants. You will be asking people from time to time to share things that they worked on in a breakout group. And if they can't share their screen, that's going to severely hamper what they can share with the rest of the group. Who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? You can have that set to all participants. I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend just host, because you may need to get control back. And you don't want everybody trying to screen share at the same time. So I would say host only could be the one that should be able to start screen sharing when someone else is sharing. Disable desktop screen share for users. Yeah, I would disable that as a general rule. Do you want to allow people to annotate? So if you're in the whiteboard, for example, or if you're on a screen share, you can draw on the screen that is there. And it's useful to add information to screens or to draw attention to what you're talking about on a screen. I recommend that be set to on. And you want to allow saving of shared screens with the annotations, and I think that's a good thing to have on as well. Do you want to allow the whiteboard in a Zoom meeting? The whiteboard is we'll talk about that in our next session, but the whiteboard basically is a way for people to capture thoughts, ideas, maybe do some group brainstorming. So that's a good one to have on. Do you want to allow people to save, allow the saving of that whiteboard? That's important to have. Do you want to have it auto-saved? And you have a choice of saving it as either a PNG, which is very similar to a picture file like a JPEG. It's just a different format, or you can have it saved as a PDF. I would recommend saving it as a PDF because it is much more universal. During screen sharing, remote control, it can be a very important one. The person that is sharing can allow others to control the screen at that point in time. If this is set to yes, I think that was useful for us. Do you want to allow non-verbal feedback? So there are options, there are icons in the participant panel they can click on to either clap or to thumbs up, that kind of a thing. I think that's good to have to give you a chance to get some immediate response. Meeting reactions, again, there are emoji that can show, they disappear after 10 seconds. There's an option for people to change their reaction skin tone. That's a good one to have on as well. Do you want to allow removed participants to rejoin? That's it, very important. That's set to yes. If somebody is removed because their screen locks up, or for some reason, one of the things we experienced was that from time to time, people would lose the screen that was being shared and couldn't get back to the regular screen. So we had to remove them from the meeting and then let them rejoin. So this is important to have this set to on. Allow participants to rename themselves. This is kind of a fun thing. It's not an absolute requirement, but people can call themselves whatever they want, and it adds a little bit of color and sometimes humor to the call. Hide participant profile pictures in a meeting. You can do that if somebody is in perhaps a secure area. They don't want people seeing what they look like. You could have it on. I think most of the time we would have that off as I have it here. Some of the advanced meeting settings, and you can see we're kind of walking through this, report participants to Zoom. If somebody's behaving inappropriately, you can submit that, and Zoom will take some appropriate action in time. Do you want to allow breakout rooms? Super important, because you'll use breakout rooms for group assignments as you go through the CHE lessons. And you want to allow the host to assign participants to breakout rooms. Otherwise, it happens automatically, and you don't have any ability to move around people that are in different Zoom breakout rooms. I think it's important to have that ability, because you will probably want to train some people in advance how the breakout rooms work, and in the tools like Google Jamboards, Google Drawings, Padlets, PowerPoint, Word, whatever it is you might be using. You want them to be trained in advance, and you want to make sure that you have at least one of those people in each breakout room to help assist newcomers to Zoom, so that they can manipulate those tools. So it's important to allow the host to assign participants when scheduling. Remote support off, closed captioning. You could turn that on if you think it would be helpful. We didn't use it, we didn't need it, but you might want to do that if you have people that are sight impaired, for example. Do you want to save the closed captions and transcripts? You can allow the participants to do that if you wish. We didn't do that. Far end camera control, we again had off. I'm not going to mention all these because not all of them I think are very apropos to what we're doing. You can study them in more detail if you wish later. But activating high quality video for hosts and participants uses more bandwidth. We have it turned on because those that have high bandwidth, we wanted them to be able to use it and take advantage of it, so the screens would be clearer. They'd be able to read things that were being shared on screens as well, much more easily. Do you want to allow a virtual background so you can keep your environment private? For example, if you have a photo of a favorite place at the mountains or the beach or whatever, you can choose a background, have that show up behind you instead of at your house or some other location. So that can be used with or without a green screen. So if you have virtual background on, you also have the option of allowing videos for virtual backgrounds. There are a couple that come standard with Zoom. One of them is a background of the Northern Lights or the Aurora Borealis. Another one is a beach scene. Do you want to have video filters turned on? We didn't use that, but people could apply filters to videos if they wanted to. Identify guest participants well. We treat everybody like a guest, so we didn't think that was very important. Auto answer group in chat. We had that off. People can see chat for everyone anyway, but we didn't want to have it automatically responding to chats. Automatically show default email, again, had that off. HTML format email for Outlook plugin. So if you're using Outlook with your medam.org email address, you probably want to have that turned on. These others, allowing users to select stereo audio, you want to probably have that turned off because that takes more bandwidth again, and people with slow connections, that wouldn't be very useful. Allow users to select original sound. Again, I think you can have that off. Data center regions stuff, they can have that off. Show a join from your browser link. Yes, I would have that turned on. And do you want to allow live streaming meetings when you are using Zoom? You can live stream your meeting to Facebook or Workbook by Facebook or YouTube or some custom live streaming service. You probably don't need that to be on, but it doesn't hurt to have it on in case you want to use that sometime. Email notifications. Do you want to let people know when a cloud recording is available? It'll let the host know. You can send a copy to the person that scheduled the meeting if you want, or you can send a copy to alternative hosts. But for the host to have a copy of the cloud recording when it's available is very, very useful. So you can save it and put it where you want it to be. If attendees join the meeting before the host, do you want to notify the host that somebody's waiting for you in the waiting room? That's important to be yes. Notify people if a meeting is canceled. That's yes. When an alternative host is set or removed from a meeting, that should be yes, so that the other hosts know what is going on. If someone schedules a meeting for you, you can have the host be notified that it's been scheduled. That would probably be good to be yes. When a cloud recording is going to be permanently deleted from trash, it'll give the host 7 days notice before that happens, so you can save it somewhere else. Do you want to blur a snapshot with iOS Task Switcher? That's only for people that are on Macs. Probably want that to be yes. Invitation emails, what language do you want them to go in? And you want them to go in English, and you can see a preview of what it will look like. Security privileges, et cetera, I wouldn't worry too much about those. So let's go back up now to the top. Those are your in-meeting settings. Let's look at recording settings real quickly. Do you want to have it saved locally to your hard drive? I have that yes. And the host also set to give participants the permission to record locally if you would choose to do that. They may request it, and you might choose to not give it to them. That's up to you. Do you want to allow recording into the web or into the cloud as well? I would say yes to both of those. That way you can either record to the cloud or you can record locally. Do you want to record? Then there are several options under the cloud recording. Do you want to have the active speaker with the shared screen? Yes or no, or do you just want the shared screen? Do you want to have the gallery view with the shared screen? You can do that. Do you want to record just the active speaker with the gallery view and the shared screen? So you have several options here. You can also record an audio only file. I think that's probably a good option. Again, if you're going to be doing this with some folks that are that travel a lot to secure areas, sensitive areas of the world, it'd be nice for them to have an audio only file and not have faces on the screen. And you want to save chat messages from the meeting and webinar, have that on as well. Some advanced cloud recording settings. Do you want to add a timestamp? I think timestamps are unnecessary and kind of a distraction because it shows up on the screen of the clock running. So I would say no. Do you want to display the participants' names? You could again have that off if you have security concerns. You could have thumbnails off when sharing if you want to. Optimize the recording for a third-party video editor. That's probably a good thing to have as yes, in case we want to take your meeting recording, turn it into a YouTube video. It's important to have that ability turned on. Save the panelist chat to the recording. That's another option that I think is good to have on. Automatic recordings, no, because you should always get permission before you do that. So I have that set to off, but that means you need to remember to ask permission and to start recording once you've started the Zoom call if you want to do that. IP address control, ignore that one. Only authenticated users can view cloud recordings. Again, I have that set to no for our virtual training. It wasn't needed. Require a password to access shared cloud recordings. Have that set to yes. I think that's important because, again, if somebody got a hold of someone else's computer or their smartphone, you don't want them to automatically be able to access those cloud recordings in a case where security might be important. Automatically delete cloud recordings after X number of days. You can specify how many days that is. I have it turned off. It might be that you will need to do that if you start running out of cloud storage space. The host can delete cloud recordings is set to yes. Recording disclaimer, I would have that set to yes so people know that it's going to be recording. Ask participants for consent, yes, and ask the host to confirm before starting a recording. Also, I would have set to yes. Okay, let's look at the settings for telephone. If somebody's going to be coming in by telephone, do you want to show international numbers link on the invitation email? Yes. So if they're going to join the call from their phone, you want them to be able to access it using the phone and an international access number, so they're not paying long distance charges all the time. You also choose where most of the participants will call in the meeting from. So kind of if you're doing this training in India, that would probably, or for people that are in India, you would want that set to India. Here in the United States, you want it set to the United States. Do you want to have third-party audio configuration recording? I don't think so. Mask the phone number in the participant list. I had yes, again, for privacy purposes. Okay, so that kind of gives you a sense for the settings in Zoom. We're going to call that it for now, and in our next session, we'll move on to some actual Zoom screens and looking at some of the important settings